Hi, everyone. This is Heather with the Old Schoolhouse. Thank you for joining us for another Homeschool Live Roundtable. Today, we have several special guests. We have Dianne Kraft. She has over 35 years experience teaching children. She has developed the Dianne Kraft Right Brain Learning System, and she began teaching the workshop called Brain Integration Therapy in 1988, and she has taught it to children, educators, psychologists, speech therapists, and occupational therapists. And in 1993, she began teaching these life-changing concepts directly to parents so that they could work with their children on their own. We also have Nadim from CTCMath. He looks after all things CTCMath, and he's been working with the team for over 8 years. He has a college degree in math and economics, and he and his wife have been married for 5 years, and they have 3 children. And he is such a strong supporter of the homeschool community. Thank you for joining us, Nadim. We also have Gena and Dianne Suarez, and they are joining us to represent the Old Schoolhouse. Gena is the publisher, along with her husband Paul, of the Old Schoolhouse magazine that has been around for over 20 years serving the homeschool community. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today for a Homeschool Live Roundtable. So I would love to get started and just talk about the pressing need. So many homeschooling families have special needs children in their home, and they're not sure how to go about homeschooling them. And I would love, Dianne, if you could just share with us a little bit, maybe about how your company started or how your company can help homeschooling families with children that have special needs.
Thank you. Well, we love our families who have special needs kids, and most of us do in a way, don't we? What we do is we first send people to God, who Jeremiah 33:3 is God's telephone number. And the nice thing about having God's telephone number is he picks up. You know how if you have a teenager, they never pick up, do they? They only answer by message. So Jeremiah 33:3 says, ask and I will answer you, and I will show you solutions that you didn't know existed. Depends on what translation you use, but that's what it says. I will show you things of which you know not. So we can confidently ask God to show us. We have a special child with, I just call them struggling learners. They have to work too hard to learn. And let's identify why they have to work too hard to learn, and then what to do about it. And that's what we do. But that's how he answers. So anybody who comes to our booth when we're speaking or calls us, we say, yeah, and they'll say, well, we had a hard time getting through. They say, well, we have, everybody does now at this time, as more than they can handle. But I believe that God sends them to us, and we bring them the solutions He's revealed to us. We all are a piece of this big pie of helping all God's people. So at any rate, when I was growing up, my mother was a special education teacher. So I loved working in the classroom. And that's when all kids who learned differently or had either a glitch, as we call it, a identified learning disability, or a real physical disability with it. So everybody was taught together. Then, of course, they parsed that all out as we grew in our knowledge of how kids learn and how to zero in on it. So my mother had an interest in, so I went on and I became a special education teacher, got a master's and a bachelor's. That didn't mean I was an expert at all. All we learned there was how to teach slower, louder, and multiple repetitions. That was our intervention. Well, sure, sometimes some of the kids would react. All they needed was a little more time, a little more one-on-one. But that wasn't the main crowd. So when I became a special ed teacher, and then I homeschooled my son for many years. I was home for 15 years, homeschooling him and just loving it. And then he didn't need that forever, so he went off. He was in college and actually has a degree himself in that. And anyway, so I went back into the classroom then, into the resource room. And as I was teaching these wonderful kids who came in, 6th, 7th, 8th graders, there was one group at one time in one school and the others were elementary. and it discovered that most of them came in with a 2.6 reading level as a sixth grader in the Woodcock-Johnson. After second grade, it gets to be harder. And I thought, whoa, if I just keep doing this is going to always be behind. And they weren't. So I had moderate needs, as they call. They had parsed them out into the different needs. And so anyway, I asked God, I said, all right, Father, you know how the brain is made. You know that they've had good parents, good teaching, good kids, and yet they're not making any progress in reading at all. And spelling was W-U-Z, that type of thing. So if you show me what to do, I'll help as many kids as I can. And so I got in the mail the next week, brain integration. And I needed to go to actually sell a car at that time to afford to take those classes. And there are 25 of us from around the country. Australia is big on brain integration therapy. And easy stuff to know. But what they realized is that and this is revolutionary, but it's been for 25 years, we've gotten the same results. It's not recent. They found that with dyslexia and with dysgraphia and with many learning glitches, that they have not, the center of the body, the corpus callosum, the midline, is become a barrier for them instead of a bridge. And so of all things, we incorporated at the beginning of class midline therapies. Basically, we just stood in a line and we did our crossing the midline with our hands, because we found that the parts of dyslexia that are so puzzling, the reversals that they have to spend battery energy for something that their sibling or peer does not have to spend any battery energy on, and that's sorting out left and right. So then if that doesn't sort itself out by age 7, you'll see they don't like to ride a bike and all sorts of other midline things too. But that they cannot, we can teach them BED with all the different stories, but they have to stop and use battery energy to think about it. So they get behind right away. So I realized that the first thing I needed to do was give these wonderful kids a plumb line, a strong midline, make the bridge over the corpus callosum. Sometimes I've heard someone call it true north. In other words, it's partly physical. And that is the hardest thing for my teachers, and because we teach this in college level classes and such, for them to get, my OTs and PTs who take it for continuing, and they know, of course, that learning is often trapped in the body, that something got in the way of their making connections. And we can do it in 20 minutes a day, which is just so amazing. So at the beginning of the classroom, when they came in to my resource room for reading or math, which I'm so glad that Nadim is going to talk about math. I never did love that a lot. So, but the reading of language arts was really great for us. So as they came in, we do midline therapy, our midline exercises standing there in the school setting. So 20 minutes of our day was with midline, and the rest I taught the subjects and caught them up on the subjects. Then as I was doing that, and we were seeing such changes, so that teachers would come in usually by Christmas. It took us from September to Christmas to do enough midline, the proprioception of the muscles causes the signals of the brain to connect. It's a simple technique and easy to teach and easy to do. And so anyway, we would do that. And by Christmas, they would say, you know what? They don't reverse their numbers anymore when they're writing.
Wow.
Then, yeah, I know. And this is why we put our expectation there. We say to parents, if by Christmas you don't see this evidence that things are working, let us know, because we've never not seen it work. I mean, it's a very, very simple little thing. And with eye tracking, many times we thought it was a reading problem. Well, no, it was an eye tracking problem. Their eyes would skip as they moved. And sometimes vision therapy helped it. It's a good resource, but it's so expensive. So we didn't have that resource in school. So we did our eye aid exercise, telling the body proprioceptor muscles, use both eyes together as a team so that you don't have to think about is that a bee, a bog, or a dog? So visually, they were reversing. Writing, they were reversing. They had a dysgraphia that people would say, well, they're so bright. We had our twice exceptional kids who have like 130 IQ, but were still reversing when they wrote. And they had all these ideas in their head, but they couldn't get it out. By doing again a crossing the midline exercise, which was really powerful. And again, by the end of the year, not only were they not reversing, but they were writing and writing stories and writing, because we remove the blocks. So we have something we call, it's been around a long time, identifying and correcting blocked learning gates. 4 learning gates we check there. So we tell parents how to do this. After a while, I said, well, sure, I can do this with a small group of kids. In fact, a counselor from one of our middle schools said, Mrs. Kraft, if you would do this privately, we'd send all the kids around here to you. And that sounded real good to me. So since then, I started doing consulting and then speaking and all of that. But the whole idea is it doesn't have to be so expensive, and it does not have to be so hard. It is so much easier because in a 45-minute time, so they come in for reading, we do what we call 5 steps out of dyslexia. Number 1, we get those eyes tracking so they don't have to think about the orientation of a word and then remember the word. You see how that's expecting too much of the brain, and they get behind, and they get more and more behind the older they get. And so what we noticed is that they would stop reversing, and we were just so thrilled about that. So it's the first part is a visual. So I would teach the teachers. I said, first, when you read to them, or you have them read, instead of looking at the words, how we do and write them all down, I said, watch their eyes. Because when the saccades, our eyes go from left to right, they sweep over and read it this way, but they go left to right, come back, check that out again. And they were doing so many extra saccades or eye movements, extraneous eye movements, wore them out. And besides that, the reading session was just so hard because they knew a word. They say, the parents will say, I know they know the word. I said, yeah, they're not just being stubborn. They're having to parse out, what are those words doing? THE would often be HET to them. Not when we did exercises, though. And so I thought, oh, this is so easy. I thought by this time, that was 25 years ago we learned it. I thought by this time, everybody would be prefacing every lesson with midline therapy, our midline exercises. But it's still brand new. It's still curriculum driven and workbook driven. And I'm thinking it doesn't have to be. So we always first have them buy paper clips. And we just say, because we're going to paperclip a lot of those things together and just skip them. Because we'll be forever remediating if we try to remediate out of a curriculum. No, we have to make the process easier. The brain wants to do this so easy so that the muscles drive the brain. That's a Jeremiah 33:3 answer. He picks up and says, I'm going to show you some new things that you didn't know. And just takes, one of the things I admire about homeschool parents is their desire to help their child, and they'll stretch themselves so much to help their child. And so we just find that they will work way beyond their natural teaching desires, because they would love to have a curriculum. They'd love to check the boxes off. But it's different with these guys. I always say, hey, if it's working for them, don't touch it. We don't want to interfere with anything that's working. We're not looking for more to do. But if it's not, let's identify that it's there and it can be corrected. That's the key. So many things can be corrected that we did not think were corrected, that were even gene-driven, even with our wonderful Down syndrome children. If we apply the right technique. So I went on and became a nutritionist too, because I realized that we're not just a head walking around, and now we know so much about what the gut biome and autism is. Looking at 3 more books on autism, and their whole approach is exactly what I love, and that's both the midline and the nutritional. So the 4 learning gates they identify, why is this child struggling with reading or with writing, or all those areas, one of which is what their eyes are tracking well. What's the auditory issue going on? Are they not being able to remember sounds? Do we have to add something to the sounds for them to be able to remember, like Nadim, they do in their courses? And so we look at that. How there's a checklist. There's 10 different auditory channels. Let's find out which ones are out, and then we make a plan and we correct it by the end of the year. So it's not like a quick program, but it's only 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week. I mean, and it costs nothing. So it's why it's not curriculum driven. We consume no curriculum with this. We show them how to use their brain, first how to use their muscles with that, but always within a lesson, because I still needed to teach reading. I was still in, my responsibility was their grade. So it's not like we could just go in. There wasn't a gym class. So of the 4 learning gates, then we have the visual, we check out the auditory, visual motor. These are our wonderful kids who have to work too hard to get their thoughts from their head down. Like even in math, Nadim, I'm sure you've seen many of the kids who try to do all of their math orally because, and mental math, because when they write it down, they don't get it, or it's harder for them. So they have a block between their head and their hand, and they learn really well orally, but they don't. If we put the offending utensil in their hand, just the fact that they have it in their hand and they're supposed to use it, they just shut down. Yeah. And so we call that a dysgraphia, and it really is. And one year I had all my what we call twice exceptional kids, which are kids who, between 90 and 109 is the average IQ. We can do a lot with an average IQ. We don't have to have anything higher. They all did. In the school system, they were identified as gifted if they were above 120, 121 IQ. So I had a whole group of them, and they were, why do we call them twice exceptional? One exception is they had an IQ above average level. That was one exception. The other exception was that they had a terrible glitch in their writing. And even if we, of course, put them on keyboard and everything, we're the digital age, but that still was hard for them because they have a block between the head and their hand. And they looked like, when we would go to IEP meetings, they looked like kids, they would call them sloppy, lazy, unmotivated. So I said, well, if that's the case, I must be the best psychologist out there, because they get happy. Why? Because we give them a strong midline. That midline is so important for writing or typing, of course, or keyboard and everything like that. But it involves so many things that every year we learn more about this very exercise that we've been doing for 25 years. It will get rid of this dysgraphia. What you need is a crayon, piece of paper, and the knowledge to do it. I mean, nothing is going to break the bank with this. And so what we would find out is they would have these wonderful ideas. They would orally, they could tell you the best story in the world, and the parents and the teachers were compensating by being their scribe. Wonderful. We love compensations. We'll take everything that makes life easier until we fix it. We're on our way to correction. By the end of the year, we just get really, really nice writing from them. And so I say, so they're not having a meltdown anymore when you say to write something. They're not throwing the pencil across the room anymore. It's just because of this exercise. So with the visual motor, it's huge. A lot of the kids will, once they start doing this midline exercise, developed by Dr. Getman, by the way. I'm not smart enough to have come up with any of this, but I was able to connect the dots and apply it in a classroom. And now we have all this data because of all the kids that we've had the opportunity to work with. So anyway, as they can't ride a bike, let's say, and they say 3 weeks after doing that exercise, they're out there riding their bike because the cerebellum and all the balances changed. And in fact, we have here in Denver a driving school, and sometimes they'll send their 15-year-old and one of the boys they're trying to teach, and they'll say, everyone loves Joey, but no one will get in the car with him because he gets on a lane and he's all over the lane. He said, would you do that? They call it the crazy eight. We do the crazy eight with him and give him a midline, and so he won't scare everybody. We say, sure, yeah. And so we do what takes 10 minutes.
I think it's wonderful, Dianne, how you have given him these tools. And that is what this has been all about. Just your ministry and the work that you do with families nationwide and around the world is those tools that these families that come in, they have a struggling reader and there are a struggling learner in any one of those areas, or so many of them. They're able to come to you and learn what those tools are. And I've heard countless recommendations. I've heard countless stories where your organization has really opened up that world to the family of that they've got these tools in their toolbox now. And I think that's what it really boils down to, almost in any field. It's what parents are looking for when they're seeking to purchase curriculum, or they're looking for ways to, there's a hopelessness that settles on families that do have special learners. If those families feel like they cannot help them, that hopelessness descends on them. And so whether it's in special needs or in any area of, the needs, because unfortunately, education in this country and around the world is compulsory. There's a compulsory education problem, we like to call it. And there are so many solutions. And that's what has been so wonderful about the homeschool market and that demographic, which has stepped forward to help so many families. And when there is a hole, in your case with the struggling learners, Dianne, you have just been there and have come to the aid of so many families. And I think it's so exciting. And so, Nadim, I wanted to talk with you too, just about, on that topic of tools. Math is a big deal. Math is a real big deal. When we first started the magazine 22 years ago, we talked to a lot of families, and we still do. We're at conventions all the time. And the two, struggling learners, special needs, that is a big one. Readers, a lot of times a parent has a child who isn't even, necessarily struggling in the area of reading, but the parent is. The parent doesn't know how to teach it, and they're fearful. And it's kind of where I found myself, Nadim, with math. I'm an editor, so I can get by with writing and reading comprehension. My children score very highly at the reading comprehension because that's my favorite. I enjoy that. My kids have always lagged a little bit with math because math is not my jam. And so, but I believe that with your company, Nadim, with what you're doing, you are creating an environment where, number one, the people are coming into the times. It's tech, and these kids, they're scrolling and they're clicking. That's what the kids of today do, and they want to be online. And it's a very different world than when I was doing my SRA cards in grade school, which I loved, and also just the math workbooks and the timed drills where the teacher would stand over the whole classroom. There'd be 30 of us that would do our times tables, and we would have like 30 seconds to do it. And she had that stopwatch, and it was fun and it was fine, and we learned. Homeschool parents, they don't really, they don't have that, because and unless you're going to set your kids up or one child up at the table and say, okay, it's time to do your times tables. I've got my stopwatch out. Let's do this. It just doesn't translate over into homeschooling the way it did in a school classroom situation. And so one thing I noticed with CTCMath is that it's very intuitive. The program is very intuitive, and we're going to ask you to give us an overview of what that, because as I mentioned earlier before the interview, Zion here, who's 10, he's going into 6th grade. He's going to be taking CTCMath for the first time. He's going to do it all next year. He's looking forward to it because he's a math boy. He likes it, but he's stuck with this mama who doesn't really know how to teach math as well. Unfortunately, his father is real high up and able to do that. So that's really good. He's a high thinker and he's completed many college math courses. So we're good there. I have a safety net. But Zion here likes to learn independently, and he enjoys being on the computer. And just like any other kid in this day and age, they want to learn in that way. The thing I noticed about CTCMath is just the intuitiveness factor, where you've got the diagnostic tests in there, 3 different kinds. The weekly emailed reports is highly appealing to me, being able to store those records, because a parent always wants to know at any given moment where the records are. If someone comes knocking, they want to be able to prove where their children where they're at, in any academic field, and to have those reports emailed to me is very, I'm really happy about that. I'm excited about that. But tell us a little bit about the tools that CTCMath delivers to families. You're very popular. The program is everywhere. Everywhere I go on social media, it's all over the place. And it's exciting enough to me to where I've chosen it for Zion here, and probably his sister Chloe, who's 13, will be using it as well. But can you tell us a little bit? Just tell us about the tools of CTCMath.
Yeah, thank you, Gena, and it's such a great story to hear from Dianne and to hear you, Gena. So thanks for having me. I feel really honored and blessed to be part of this conversation. With CTCMath, as you said, that word tools is so important, because the more we equip parents, the more options that they have, and each child is unique, and each child will learn in a different way, and some things work better than other things. And I think what's really, really important is adaptive learning. So to deliver the right question at the right time, to take them along a journey, in a sense, to hold their hand and lead them up and not stumble down or fall too far down that their confidence is beat up. So with CTCMath, the questions are adaptive. There's a very clever algorithm working in the background to deliver the right question at the right time. The heavy lifting when it comes to teaching, as you sort of alluded to, Gena, math is a difficult subject to teach. It's you can't open a textbook and just read math and learn it. It has to be delivered. It has to be taught. The multi-sensory approach is very important, and I guess that's why Pat took it online. And his ability to teach a concept in a short, concise, easy to understand manner. Two words that really stood out when Diana was talking was slower and more repetition. Yeah. And that's what you get with CTCMath. You have access to all lessons from all grades. It only makes sense. If a child is struggling, you want to deliver the right content. You want to help them. So you don't want to lock them into one grade level. And this is one of the many beautiful things about homeschooling is we really try to encourage the child to learn at their own pace. Mm-hmm. So we give them access to all lessons from all grades. The diagnostic tests and the weekly revisions allow you to figure out the problems, to find those gaps, and then go back and remedy them and have a solution for them. We have worksheets and the interactive questions. We always encourage pen and paper style math. But then there's little things that will also possibly help a parent, such as the questions being read out. There's a speaker button that allows the questions to be read out. We're introducing closed captions very soon. There's software that you can sort of use as a plug-in, but then there's sometimes some mistakes that can occur there. So we're making some inroads into closed captions for all our video tutorials. And then the ability to create your own questions, or create your own curriculum. These are all options that the parents have. Again, it's picking and choosing the tools that best serve and address your child's needs. And I also want to touch on one other thing that I think Gena and Dianne, certainly you mentioned. If it's not broken, don't fix it. If it's working, leave it. We're not out to get every single learner. This is not our philosophy. Our philosophy is to have a positive impact on as many families as possible. So in an area of math, if it's working, stick to it. But if there's a struggle there, and if something's not quite right, then look for that solution. As Dianne as well mentioned, it might be a process thing where you come across the right solution and everything else just falls into place.
Right. Well, one thing I really liked about it too, when I was looking through the CTCMath program, you have two dashboards. You've got the child dashboard and the parent dashboard. And I really, really like that, because the parent can be behind the scenes. They know they're, like what you just said, with homeschooling, you're customizing a child's education. It's meant for that particular child. You may have one child that needs one thing and another. So for example, I noticed that, speaking back to the intuitiveness of the program, I noticed that a parent can actually set certain parameters for, like, for example, they can, if their child, as long as they only missed 3 or fewer problems, for example, they could move forward. Or if they get an 80% or versus a 90%, there's different things. And I noticed that what came to mind with a special learner, maybe a child who really isn't very confident yet in math, or even a parent who's not that confident, they could set that behind the scenes without the child feeling like they're being pointed out. They just go to their dashboard and they're all set. Their tasks are there. I thought that was great. That is, gets that child used to using a dashboard too, but it's already preset by mom and dad.
Yeah,
Nice.
and we want to build confidence. We don't want to destroy that. So having the ability to go in and set tasks and even hide the grade level if needed. So say your child's in 5th grade, but they're really at a 2nd grade math level. Well, we've got ways around that without letting them know that, without making that.
I love that.
Making them feel that. And the ability to set those tasks and to lower the pass mark. We also have what's called mastery, which is a great way to encourage students to see more problems and more difficult problems as they go through their journey. Again, right question at the right time.
Yeah.
So it's bringing together a combination of things really, and all with the aim of building confidence and them really learning at their own pace.
That's important.
So we have an audience question from Deborah, and I wanted to just warn you, it's going to cover up some of your faces because it's a little long. So we'll put it up for Dianne, and then we will take it down. So Dianne, what about a child, this is from Deborah, what about a child who can read well, understand complicated things, but just struggles to present back verbally what they have learned? It just all gets stuck in the brain and verbally struggles to get anything back out. This is referring to a 14-year-old boy. He says his brain is overloaded and he doesn't know how to organize those thoughts enough to let anything intelligent out, but it is all in there. What is that? How do I help?
A 5-minute consultation. So, all right. The first thing I would do is just find out if there's a learning block. Is it a visual motor? Is it auditory? Which it could be, sounds like it possibly is. Or is it attention and focus? Does he have to spend too much energy focusing? And that's the piece that we pull our nutritional hat for. So I would first, otherwise, if all of those things turned out like, no, his writing's good, because the writing aid also is verbal expression. So the back part of the brain is the receptive part, and the front part is the expressive. So if that's disconnected, I always do exercises as my baseline for everything, because everybody, even adults, do really well. They're even using with people who have strokes, etc., doing that writing aid exercise by Dr. Getman, because it opens up so many expressive ways. So I would just do that anyway with them, because it takes 15 minutes and it will open up. And then I get to my right brain teaching, which basically shows them how to convert the words into pictures. And that and Nadim was talking about that too, about all the different ways that you can accommodate how they learn. And so I just did, when my kids were getting even reading comprehension, maybe Gena's forte, but for my kids, they would read words, wrote, but weren't making a movie in their head. We just practiced it. So for this young man, I would see what's getting him stuck. Does he making a movie in his head about a story? If not, we show him how to do that. A little 10-minute training that you do. We did it after in the afternoon, and converting words to pictures. And it really helps even with the ACT tests. They learn how to read and see a movie like most of us do, but they don't. So we show them manual how to do that. So if he's stuck with what he's saying, this is what I would do. The reason I love Old Schoolhouse and I love Jeannie and Deborah's approach is they have had a Ask a Specialist column for how many years do you think that is, Gina? 4 years, 3-4 years. What they are always have been learning about is and interested in their parents knowing is how to identify this at home, because by the time you either wait for somebody to test them, and I get them all the time, 12 pages of data, or what about just try the solution and see, if it doesn't work, then, you move on, like you say, different tools. So one of the articles I wrote for the magazine, so that hopefully you can get it all for free, is called What Happens When They Don't Remember, or Reading Comprehension. And we just show how to do converting words to pictures step by step. They love it. It works well. And they learn that that's what they need to be doing. What possibly he's not storing the information easily. Remember, the right brain's the long-term storage, left brain data, a little short-term storage. No problem. It usually crosses over. For him, it isn't. So I would just encourage them to look up that article in the Old Schoolhouse. I don't know when it was, but it has in there all the steps that I did with my students. It's also the ones I show the parents, and we say, oh yeah, I can. We even had one child who went from getting a 13 in his ACT for reading comprehension because he just could read the words fine, but that was it. And then we just did this little process, and for probably about 6 weeks, and he then got a 31, to tell you the truth, and got a little scholarship. Not everything turns out like that, but they all we could find out then why he can't convert his words, his pictures into words, or words into pictures.
So before we sign off, I just want everyone to know that both Nadim and Dianne have incredible resources that you can access today. I want to first mention Dianne's because, as she mentioned, she's written several articles for us, which if you go to tosapps.com and download the Old Schoolhouse app, you can search for previously written articles, but you can also visit diannecraft.org and check out the services that she has available to the homeschool community there. Also, if you're a schoolhouseteachers.com member, you can go to the Focused Learning Center, and there are articles by Dianne and many others there as well. And I believe it was 2014 that she spoke at one of our expos. And if you are a schoolhouseteachers.com member, you can access that in the member resources section. And I also wanted to let you know that if you are interested in CTCMath for your learner, for your struggling learner, for anyone in your family, they have an incredible homeschool discount. Nadim, if they go to ctcmath.com, how can they access the homeschool discount, and what is that discount?
Sure. Just click on the homeschool link. So if you click on the homeschool link, it activates that discount for you, and it's a half price discount. So
half price.
Very good.
Wow.
We love homeschoolers.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Gina, is there anything else that you would like to add before we sign off?
I just want to say that I appreciate you both so much, that you have really just given a shot of encouragement into the homeschooling community. People know who you guys are, and they know what your products are and your services are, and we will continue to just talk about it from the rooftops. We definitely are very much encouraged by what you do, and we want to share it with others. We'll continue to do that. So keep up the good work. Really appreciate it.
And we'd like to acknowledge Zion. What a good listener you are. And I can see in your eyes what a learner you are. Be fun to watch you grow.
He'll be enjoying the CTCMath this year.
Yes, ma'am, I will.
It sounds like it. Yeah, let us know all about it.
For sure.
Well, thank you, Dianne, Nadim, Gina, and Zion. I appreciate you joining me today, and we will see you next time for another Homeschool Live.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.